Echoes before dawn. The story began in a place where the walls of time seemed thinner than anywhere else. The city in which Dr. Layla Rahman lived was an old city filled with crowded markets, narrow lanes, and buildings that bore the scars of many centuries. It was a city where history had never fully gone to sleep and where forgotten voices seemed to whisper in the cracks of the stone. Pavements. Dr. Layla Rahman was a scholar of ancient texts working in the Institute for Comparative Religions. The institute was not a grand palace of learning like the modern universities filled with bright glass towers. It was instead a humble and quiet place, tucked between a bustling cafe and a silk shop in the older quarter of the city. Its walls were lined with shelves upon shelves of manuscripts and books so fragile that even the air seemed to treat them with caution. One morning, as Layla sorted through donations that had been left unrecorded, in the basement of the institute, she discovered a battered wooden crate. The crate was rough and weathered, smelling faintly of cedar wood and carrying with it a weight of age. When she touched it, she felt a strange energy as though it carried a story waiting to be told. Scratched across the outside of the crate were words in Arabic, carved in hurried strokes. They asked a question that both startled and intrigued her: who came before Adam? Beneath the Arabic inscription in faint pencil, another language had been used to translate the same phrase into English. The words stared at her with unsettling power: who came before Adam as. Her heart raced as she carefully opened the crate. Inside lay a manuscript, not bound in the manner of ordinary books, but instead stitched together from a mixture of vellum, parchment, and fragile paper bound with a strip of braided leather. Time had gnawed at its corners, and its surface was flecked with age. Yet when Layla opened it, the inked letters still seemed alive, whispering from the pages. On the very first leaf, the same question appeared again, written with deliberate strokes that carried both reverence and fear. Who came before Adam as. The mysteries of pre-human creation. The title itself felt like a challenge, a door thrown open to a subject most scholars avoided. Layla's fingers lingered over the words. In the circles of her profession, questions about creation were always delicate, but this manuscript seemed to move boldly into territory that most only hinted at. The first passages were written in careful script, resembling the work of a disciplined scholar. They quoted known figures like Al-Tabari and Ibn Kathir, who had once written about creation. But as the pages unfolded, they blended these authoritative voices with whispers from folklore, oral traditions, and forgotten storytellers. There were diagrams of stars, hand-drawn figures of strange beings, and even a sketch of a creature with elongated limbs encircling a crescent moon. Layla read further, her curiosity pulling her deeper. The manuscript did not simply offer interpretations of scripture. Instead, it compiled stories, collected from across regions and generations, from sailors who claimed to have seen lights in the sea, from monks who guarded lost libraries, and from desert tribes who whispered of creatures that had walked the earth long before mankind. In one section, the writer insisted that the world before Adam had not been empty. It spoke of earlier creations, intelligences that lived, breathed, and ruled long before humans were shaped from clay. Some were described as beings of smokeless fire like the Jinn. Others were stranger still, described as luminous entities formed of light who once governed with gentleness until their authority was tested. Still others were depicted as shadowy figures who roamed deserts, mountains, and oceans, leaving behind bones, ruins, and memories. Layla found herself pausing over a sentence written in smaller, hurried handwriting on the margin of the manuscript. It read, "There are witnesses who remember the time before the naming. They speak in dreams and signs. They keep maps under their tongues." Beneath it, another hand had scribbled a message that felt almost like an instruction: "Seek the keeper at the mouth of the wadi." The words unsettled her. She remembered a map she had once seen in a colleague's office. It showed a desert far south of the city, marked with caravan routes and ancient ruins. On it, there was a symbol of a palm tree with the words Al-Lawh, the mouth. She had dismissed it at the time as a forgotten place of no significance. But now, reading the manuscript, it returned to her as if it had been waiting all along. Layla's training told her to approach the matter with care. Manuscripts could deceive. Legends could mislead. Yet another part of her urged her to follow the trail. Perhaps the mystery of pre-human creation was not merely a theological speculation, but a living memory still preserved in forgotten corners of the world. She reached out to Yusuf al-Bayani, an ethnographer and old friend known for his restless curiosity. Yusuf was a collector of oral histories, traveling across villages to record songs, poems, and tales from elders who still remembered the old ways. When she told him about the manuscript, his reply was swift. "Meet me at the old bridge at dawn. Bring the crate." At sunrise, they left the city behind its skyline, shrinking as the road led them into the vast desert. The plains stretched endlessly under a sky that seemed both empty and full at once. The silence of the desert was broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional call of a distant bird. By midday, they reached the settlement at the edge of the wadi. It was a small cluster of homes built around a spring where palm trees offered shade. The people greeted them with quiet curiosity, their dialect laced with older sounds of Arabic and Turkish. Among them lived the one they sought, the keeper of the wadi. The keeper was an elderly man with skin darkened by sun and eyes that carried the glint of distant memories. He sat outside a modest dwelling polishing a piece of stone. When Layla and Yusuf approached, he lifted his head slowly. "You have brought the question back," he said in a low voice. "Who came before Adam?" Layla introduced herself and explained what she had found. The keeper nodded gravely. "Among us the old stories never die," he said. "They flow in the water of this spring and pass through our tongues. We are custodians of memories not written in books, but carried in breath and in silence." When Yusuf asked about the mouth of the wadi, the keeper pointed toward a narrow path that twisted between cliffs. He spoke of a cave hidden within the wadi, a place where the ground hummed like a living voice. "They say the cave remembers," the keeper said. "Before men claimed the earth as their own, there were other shapes, other beings. They left signs for those who know how to see. Guided by the keeper, they entered the wadi at dusk. The cliffs rose high around them, their shadows deepening as the light faded. At last they reached the cave, a dark mouth opening into the stone. Inside, the air was cool, heavy, with the scent of minerals, and something older that words could not capture. The walls bore markings, lines, spirals, and strange shapes that seemed part human, part animal. In the center of the chamber lay a stone slab. Upon it were arranged objects, collected with care: a flint blade, a fragment of pottery, a cowrie shell, and a shard of glass that sparkled with trapped light. But what drew Layla's attention most was an object half buried in dust. She brushed it clean with her gloved hand and found herself holding a bone, long curved and polished by time. It looked like no ordinary fossil. Along its length ran a groove etched with marks resembling a script not known to her. The letters were delicate, looping, and precise, like a language meant for voices beyond human. The keeper watched silently before speaking. "They called them the Before," he said. "Not of flesh as we are, not of fire as the Jinn, but sometimes of light, sometimes of stone, sometimes of the wind itself. They left behind bones like this. They left behind signs." That night, as Layla and Yusuf camped by the wadi, the sky stretched over them like an ocean of stars. Layla held the notebook in her lap, copying the markings from the bone by lamplight. Questions swirled in her mind. Were these the remnants of forgotten civilizations? Were these traces of myth carved into memory, or were they the faint echoes of real beings who had walked the earth before the story of Adam had even begun? She remembered the manuscript's warning. "There are witnesses who remember the time before the naming." And another line in the margins, "Beware the one who smiles without eyes." The desert wind moved softly over their camp, carrying with it a voice as if the very earth was whispering. Layla closed her eyes and thought, "This is only the beginning." the forgotten custodians. The following morning, the desert light returned with fierce brightness. The settlement at the mouth of the wadi stirred to life with the sound of goats' bells and the chatter of children. Layla woke to find the keeper already seated near the spring, gazing into the water as though he was reading its surface. Yusuf prepared tea, his movements brisk, but his expression restless. He too felt the weight of the discovery they had made in the cave. When Layla approached the keeper, he spoke without turning his head. "You saw the bone, you held it in your hands. Now you know why the question still lives among us." Layla asked him how long the people of the wadi had known these stories. "They were spoken long before I was born," he said. "My grandmother told me that her grandmother carried the same words. They say the before walked this earth when the rivers still moved freely and the deserts were green. They ruled for a time until the command came that the earth would be made ready for a new creation. But not all of them left quietly. Some faded into silence, some chose to resist. Their shadows still linger." His words carried no hint of myth or exaggeration. He spoke as though he was recalling a lived memory. Layla listened carefully, recording his phrases in her notebook. Yusuf leaned forward, unable to contain himself. "Are there more bones? Are there other signs hidden in the caves?" The keeper nodded slowly. "There are places deeper in the desert where the before left traces. But they are not places one enters lightly. They are guarded not by men but by memory itself. Some who went never returned. The earth remembers who belongs and who does not." The keeper then placed a hand on the manuscript as if he had known it all his life. His eyes narrowed as he traced one of the diagrams drawn in the margins. It was a spiral leading to a compass, with an extra point, a symbol that had puzzled Layla the night before. "This is the door," he whispered. "Not a door of wood or stone, but a passage between what was and what is. To follow this mark is to step into a place where the first forgetting happened. That forgetting was the price paid so that humanity could begin." His words sent a shiver through Layla. She realized the manuscript was not just a collection of myths. It was a map, a coded guide left by someone who had walked a path before them. Later that day, Layla and Yusuf walked again into the cave. This time they lingered longer, examining each marking. The spirals seemed almost to shimmer in the dim light. Yusuf ran his fingers along one of the carvings and shook his head. "These marks are older than any script I know. They feel like a language, but not meant for ordinary reading. More like a pattern, a code to be remembered by the body rather than the eyes." Layla took photographs, careful to document every inch. But her mind was already racing beyond the evidence. She thought of the scholars she had studied, who debated the existence of earlier creations. Some said the Jinn were rulers of the earth before Adam. Others claimed there were civilizations of clay, different from humans, but wiped away before the final creation. Could these bones and carvings be traces of those stories? Could it be that the legends were not allegories, but memories carved into the fabric of the earth itself? As they left the cave, the keeper gave them a warning. "The more you seek, the closer you will draw to the ones who guard these memories. They are not always gentle. Some do not wish for their time to be remembered. Be careful of the one who smiles without eyes." The phrase returned again like a shadow from the manuscript. Layla wrote it in the corner of her notebook, circling it twice. That evening, they left the settlement with the keeper's directions, pointing them toward an older ruin deep within the desert. The journey took 2 days across shifting dunes and rocky plains. The heat burned during the day, while the nights froze sharp and clear under skies scattered with stars. Yusuf remained determined, though Layla could sense a trace of unease in him. She herself was torn between excitement and fear. Every step seemed to carry her closer to a revelation she had never dared imagine. At last, they reached the ruins of a forgotten city. Its walls, half buried in sand, still rose in broken arches and columns. Wind whistled through hollow windows, and the silence was heavy, as though the place had been abandoned, not by humans, but by time itself. They made camp within the ruins and explored cautiously. Carvings lined the walls, worn, but still visible. They showed figures not quite human. Some had elongated skulls, others had wings of light or limbs that bent in unnatural ways. The scenes depicted battles between these beings and forces of fire and shadow. Yusuf stared at one wall for a long time. These are not random decorations. They are records. Whoever built this city wanted to remember the before. In the center of the ruin, they found a chamber marked with the spiral and compass symbol. Layla felt her pulse quicken. The chamber was circular. Its roof collapsed to reveal the night sky. On the floor, stones were arranged in precise patterns, forming a map that matched the drawing in the manuscript. When Layla stepped into the circle, a strange vibration rose beneath her feet. The ground seemed to hum like the memory of a voice. She closed her eyes and felt as though the air itself was speaking not in words, but in impressions. She smelled rain on stone, heard the cry of a bird that no longer existed, and saw flashes of figures, made of light, moving across a green world untouched by desert. Her knees weakened, and Yusuf caught her before she fell. She gasped for air, her notebook slipping from her hand. "What did you see?" Yusuf demanded, his voice urgent. "Not visions," she said breathlessly. "Memories. The earth itself remembers." That night she could not sleep. Dreams came to her uninvited. She walked across landscapes where rivers glowed with light and mountains hummed with sound. She saw beings neither angel nor human, moving with grace and authority. Then she saw them fall, scattered, broken, fading into dust. In the final moment, she saw a face smiling at her, but its eyes were blank voids that reflected nothing. She woke trembling, the warning echoing in her ears, "Beware the one who smiles without eyes." The next morning, Yusuf grew impatient. He wanted to dig further into the ruins to uncover more artifacts. But Layla urged caution. The manuscript had guided them this far, yet it was clear that what they were uncovering was not just history, but a boundary between worlds. Before they left the ruins, they discovered one final clue. In a sealed alcove, behind a crumbled wall, they found a set of stone tablets wrapped in decayed cloth. The markings on them were identical to those on the bone found in the Wadi cave. Alongside the tablets was a shard of metal, unlike any Layla had seen before. It was dark, yet glimmered faintly as though it held light within. When she touched it, a pulse of warmth traveled through her fingers. "This is not ordinary metal," Yusuf said in awe. "It feels alive." Layla carefully wrapped the shard and the tablets, placing them in her pack. She knew the journey ahead would demand answers from her that no library could provide. The manuscript was no longer simply a text. It was a doorway, and she and Yusuf had stepped through it. As they prepared to leave the ruins, Layla looked once more at the spiral and compass etched on the chamber floor. She knew they were moving toward something greater than either of them could fully grasp. The question that had begun in the basement of the Institute had now become a living force, guiding them step by step into the unknown. Who came before Adam? The answer waited in the desert, hidden in bone, stones, and memories. But Layla felt certain of one thing. To discover the truth was not only to learn of the before, but also to confront something that still lingered, something watching from the shadows of forgotten time. And as the wind swept across the ruins, carrying grains of sand like whispers, she thought she heard a faint echo, a voice, without eyes, smiling in the darkness, the shadow of the before. The journey back from the ruins was slow and heavy. The desert stretched before them with its endless silence and shifting winds. Layla carried the tablets and the strange shard of metal wrapped carefully in cloth. Every step she took seemed burdened not only with weight, but with responsibility. She was not carrying mere relics, but something older and far more dangerous than she had imagined. At night, she dreamed again. She walked in a green world, where rivers sang and the air shimmered with unseen forces. Beings of light and beings of fire shared the land in uneasy balance. Then she saw them clash and crumble. Out of the chaos appeared the same face with a smile empty of eyes. Each time she woke, she felt the echo of that smile pressing against her thoughts, as though it was trying to cross into her waking life. When they returned to the settlement, the keeper was waiting by the spring. His gaze lingered on Layla as though he already knew what she carried. "You stepped into the circle," he said softly. "The earth showed you what it remembers." Layla nodded. She placed the shard of metal before him. His hands trembled slightly as he touched it. "This belongs to the time before," he whispered. The before shaped such things not with hammers, but with will. They knew how to draw substance out of the air and light. "This shard is not dead. It still breathes." Yusuf leaned closer, fascinated. If they could shape light and metal, then they were not simple creatures. They must have been a civilization beyond what we can imagine. The keeper shook his head. They were not a civilization in the way you think. They were not bound by cities or kingdoms. They moved with the rhythm of creation itself. When they sang, mountains rose. When they fell silent, seas calmed. But when they turned against one another, their harmony shattered. That was the beginning of the end. His words filled Layla with both awe and dread. She began to understand that the mystery of the before was not only about who they were, but why they had vanished. That evening, the keeper guided them to another part of the wadi, where a narrow path wound upward to a plateau. From there, the desert stretched like an ocean, and the stars above seemed near enough to touch. He told them of a place called the Plain of Echoes. "It is said that the memories of the before walk there," he explained. "Not as bodies, but as shadows that move with the wind. If you go, you will hear them. Some may try to guide you, others may try to deceive you. This is why we tell our children never to wander there alone." Layla felt the pull of the Plain of Echoes. She knew the manuscript and the compass mark were guiding her toward that place. Against the warnings of the keeper, she and Yusuf prepared for the journey. They set out. At dawn, carrying water supplies and the manuscript which Layla refused to let out of her sight. The desert changed as they drew closer to the plain. The sand no longer shifted easily, but lay hard and cracked like ancient skin. The wind carried faint sounds that were not like any natural echo. Sometimes Layla thought she heard laughter and sometimes weeping. At other times, she heard her own name whispered softly, though no one had spoken it. At last, they reached the Plain of Echoes. It was vast and empty, its surface smooth like glass, though made of stone. The air shimmered, as if heat rose from every crack, but the night was cold. As they walked across the plain, their footsteps seemed to multiply, echoing louder than they should have. Yusuf frowned uneasily. "Do you hear that? It is as if we are not alone." Layla nodded. She felt a presence surrounding them, pressing close like a crowd, though her eyes saw only emptiness. She opened the manuscript and turned to the page with the spiral and compass mark. When she placed it against the ground, the shard of metal in her pack pulsed with faint light. Suddenly, the plain trembled. A low hum rose beneath their feet. Out of the shimmering air shapes began to form. They were not solid, but shadows of light and smoke, tall and thin, with faces that shifted constantly. Some looked almost human, others appeared like beasts with wings or horns. Yet all of them carried an aura of great age. Layla froze as the shape circled them. She realized with awe that these were the memories the keeper had spoken of. They were echoes of the before still walking the earth, not as flesh, but as lingering fragments. One of the figures stepped closer. Its form was tall and robed in shadows, yet its face was smooth and empty, except for a wide smile. The smile carried no warmth, only a hollow imitation of expression. Yusuf grasped Layla's arm. "It is him, the one from your dreams, the one who smiles without eyes." The figure tilted its head as though it recognized her. Its smile widened, though its face held no eyes to meet her gaze. A voice emerged, but not from its mouth. It filled the air around them, vibrating inside their bones. "You seek what was before, you carry what should remain hidden. The world is not ready for remembrance." Layla's voice shook, but she forced herself to answer. "Who are you? What are you?" The figure's smile never changed. "I am the witness of forgetting. I am the one who ensures silence remains. The before must not return through your words. You are trespassing in the memory of the earth." The other shapes whispered and shifted their forms as though they were caught between supporting the figure and resisting it. Layla sensed conflict among them, some wanting to reach her with fragments of guidance, others bound in fear. Yusuf stepped forward, defiant. "We are not here to harm. We only seek the truth, who came before Adam. Tell us what you are hiding." The figure's smile flickered as if disturbed by his demand. For a moment its face rippled, showing glimpses of countless other forms. Then the voice returned colder than before. "The truth is not a gift, it is a weight. You are not strong enough to carry it." The plane trembled again. The shadows began to dissolve into the air. But before they vanished, one of the gentler figures brushed close to Layla. It touched her hand lightly, and in that instant a vision flooded her mind. She saw a world radiant with light, where beings of grace moved in harmony with the creation. Then she saw them falter, their voices clashing their wills, breaking into conflict. The earth shook, seas flooded, and mountains fell. In the chaos, a command came from above, decreeing that a new creation would inherit the earth. The beings of light and shadow resisted, but were broken, scattered, and hidden. Some were erased, others faded into memories like those on the plain. When the vision ended, Layla gasped for breath. The shadow with the empty smile was gone, but its warning still echoed within her. That night, she and Yusuf camped at the edge of the plain. Neither spoke much. The silence was heavy. Layla wrote everything she had seen in her notebook. She knew now that the before had been real. They were not myths, but living beings who once shaped the world. And she knew that not all of them were gone. Some lingered as guardians of forgetting, determined to erase those who dared to remember. As she closed her notebook, she whispered to herself, "The answer is close, but so is the danger." The wind swept across the plain, carrying with it faint echoes of voices, both kind and cruel. Layla realized the question that had begun as a scholar's curiosity was now a journey of survival. To uncover the mysteries of pre-human creation was not only to learn history, it was to challenge forces that had guarded the silence of time itself. The keeper of silence, the fire burned low at the edge of the plain of echoes. The night air was sharp and restless, carrying whispers that never seemed to fade. Layla sat close to the flames, holding the manuscript on her lap. Her mind repeated the vision she had received, the harmony of the beings before Adam, their fall into conflict, and the command from above that ended their rule. Yusuf stared into the distance, his hand resting on the shard of metal as if it might protect them. He had grown quieter since the encounter with the smiling shadow, but his eyes burned with determination. At dawn, they left the plain, guided again by the compass mark in the manuscript. The path led them toward the mountains, beyond the desert dark ridges rising. Like ancient guardians, as they climbed, the air grew cooler and the sky darker. Clouds gathered, even though rain was rare in that land. It was as if the heavens themselves were watching their steps. By nightfall, they reached a cavern at the heart of the mountains. The entrance yawned wide, as though carved by no natural hand. Strange symbols marked the stone, glowing faintly as they approached. The shard in Yusuf's pack answered with its own pulse of light. "This is the place," Layla whispered. The heart of the memory. Inside the cavern, the air was heavy with silence. The walls were covered with carvings, showing beings of fire and beings of light standing over rivers, mountains, and stars. Some scenes showed peace, but others showed great wars. The final carving showed a hand descending from the sky, striking the earth with power and scattering the beings into fragments. At the center of the cavern stood a stone altar. Upon it rested a sphere made of the same strange metal as the shard. Its surface shifted as though it was alive, reflecting light that did not come from their lamps. Layla reached toward it. The air thickened. Shadows gathered at the edges of the cavern, and from them the figure emerged again. The one who smiled without eyes. You were warned. The voice echoed around them. The silence of the before is sacred, yet you come deeper seeking to tear away the veil. Layla felt her strength falter, but Yusuf stepped forward, raising the shard. If silence is sacred, why does memory still remain? Why does this sphere still breathe? If the before was meant to vanish, why has it not? The smile did not change, but the figure's form wavered as if troubled by the question. Because some truths cannot be destroyed, only buried. Layla steadied herself and spoke with courage. We do not seek to rule or to awaken what was lost. We only seek to understand, to know who came before Adam and why the world was given to us after them. Knowledge is not a crime. The cavern trembled. The figure's shadow stretched across the walls as though it would swallow them whole, yet for the first time its voice softened. To know is to carry weight heavier than mountains. The before were powerful, but they failed. Their pride shattered their harmony. Their fall was a warning to all who came after. Layla's eyes fixed on the sphere. Then let their story be remembered, not to glorify them, but to guard against repeating their fall. For a long moment's silence filled the cavern. Then the shadows began to recede. The figure's smile faded into nothing until only the voice remained. Very well. Write what you have seen, speak what you have learned, but remember this, the more you tell, the more the silence will resist, and the watchers of forgetting will never rest. The sphere before them opened slightly, revealing light that poured into the cavern. It did not blind, but illuminated visions upon the walls. They saw the beings of the before once more radiant and vast. They saw their harmony, shaping rivers and mountains. They saw their pride growing into conflict, fire against light, until the earth itself groaned under their struggle. Finally, they saw the divine decree that ended their reign and the beginning of a new chapter with Adam, chosen as the bearer of trust. As the vision faded, the sphere dimmed and sealed itself once again. The figure was gone. The cavern grew still. Only Layla, Yusuf, and the carvings remained. Layla sank to her knees, writing quickly in her notebook. She poured every detail onto the page. Yusuf stood guard, though the weight of the truth pressed upon him too. They knew they could never look at the world in the same way again. When they finally left the cavern, dawn was breaking over the mountains. The desert below glowed with new light, yet both of them felt the shadow still watching, still waiting. Back at the settlement, the keeper welcomed them, though his eyes betrayed sorrow. He knew what they had touched. He told them their path would never be safe now, because truth once uncovered was like a flame. It could not be hidden forever, but it would always draw the winds of silence against it. That night, Layla read aloud her words. Yusuf listened in silence. The story of the before was now alive again, carried not in stone or shadow, but in human memory. She ended her reading with a vow, I will tell the story not to awaken their pride, but to warn and to remind. For the earth remembers. And now so will we. The wind outside carried faint echoes, some harsh, some gentle. The watchers of forgetting were still there, but so, too, was the strength of remembrance. The mystery was no longer only a question of who came before Adam. It was now a truth that lived in Layla's heart, a truth that would guide her and Yusuf through every step of their journey ahead, a truth that would not be silenced,